Hello LJN customizers, it's Kevin again with Print Fury Customs, back at it to do another custom for you. I'm going to show off a few other skills that wasn't part of the original video, so hopefully you stay tuned and check those out. Today we're going to be making a Sin Cara figure.
Print Fury Customs. Contact the man himself, Kevin Pelkey, on Facebook. Print Fury Customs. You won't be sorry.
So I'm going to go ahead and import the main body that we're going to be using for Sin Cara. And this is actually a pretty cool design. I'm kind of excited about putting this one together actually. So I'll go ahead and import the body so you can take a look at it. Bear with me just for a moment. And here it comes. I think a few of you will be pretty excited to see this body being used. I haven't seen a whole lot of customs though. Give credit to Swales, Kevin Swales. I have seen him use this before. It is the AEW LJN style Cody Rhodes that I've scanned in. So I'm pretty excited to actually work with this, and I'm going to turn this into a version of Sin Cara. So kind of working through this pretty quickly. Last time I kind of showed you some of the main functions of Meshmixer. And again, this is a free download you can get if you just Google Meshmixer or go to meshmixer.com. You can download this program for Windows, but I'll go ahead and get started and try to get through this pretty quickly. I got a few cuts and things I want to do to this figure, so we'll jump right in. Using the T or the transform function to just kind of line up the figure a little bit. I like to just kind of have him centered. I think we kind of talked about that last time. Kind of center up the figure. So now I got a copy that's kind of straight on, and I can kind of view it of all angles flat if I want to. So now I'm going to show you a new trick. This is actually a under the edit function, and this is a mirror ability. So we're actually going to mirror this figure. So instead of using this figure as is, I want to kind of swap the arms around. So I'm going to mirror this. So I'm going to show you how to mirror that. So firstly, go ahead and click on mirror. And this is kind of like a plane cut. So I actually want to cut right off to the side of this figure. The default is actually pretty cool. Just kind of cuts him up so that he's got a really cool, like almost a Triple H kind of pose there. So that's actually really neat. But I'm just going to use this blue arrow, slide it over, because I actually want to just flip the figure. So I just want to move it enough just so it shows that I have two copies of it. So I got the original on the right and the new copy on the left. And I'll go ahead and just hit accept on that. Take a couple of seconds just for that to go ahead and add up. And then I'll show you another cool trick with separating the two meshes, because right now this is still considered one main mesh, even though there's two different colors here. I'll be working off of the green version of the Cody Rhodes. But if I show you the object browser, we kind of showed you this last time, and it gives you the ability to flip between the different items. This object browser, as you can see, only has one item, and that's the Cody Rhodes. So these are actually still just one mesh until, under the edit function, I separate shells. And what this will do is separate the two pieces into separate meshes that I can actually work with. So assuming Meshmixer doesn't take too long here. And there it goes. It snaps it into two. So now I can switch between the two of them. One thing I did want to do is edit this hand. So Cody's got that sort of taped up hand on one of his hands. I'm going to do something kind of unique here. And what I'll do is I'll actually, before I get rid of this figure here, I'm going to steal this hand and I'm going to move it and attach it to the figure that we want to keep, just so that our finished product doesn't have that taped up hand. So I'll go ahead and show you how to do that, or how I would do that anyway. When we did the plane cut on the previous episode, we selected an area that we want to cut. So I actually received a couple of comments about this, whereas you actually select the area that you want to impact. Because right now, if I were to just do a plain cut, I would probably lose his hand and basically the top of his head. So let me go ahead and just show that real quick. If I were to just do a straight plain cut right now as it is, edit, plain cut. And if I were to just take that right where I want it, to take that hand, you can see I'm impacting the head here. And if I were to execute this cut, I would actually still have a piece of that, of Cody's head here. Which for this particular example is not a big deal, because I'm going to end up getting rid of that anyway. But if you want to isolate one of your plain cuts, this is the way you're going to do it. So go ahead and select, circle or highlight the area that you want to impact. And then using this edit function up here, come down to plain cut. And now I can go ahead and just make a cut right here. Change the angle of it a little bit just to my liking. And if you remember from the previous episode, if I'm impacting the wrong area, use this blue arrow to switch over to the area that I want to impact. And now you can see that the top of Cody Rhodes' head, even though it is being sliced off by the plane of where we're actually cutting, it's not going to make a cut in that area. But what we are going to do is cut here at the wrist. And in this particular case, I'll show you what happens when we keep both. So we'll go ahead and slice, keep both, and hit accept. And real quickly, it'll go ahead and just make a cut of that. It's not a separate item as of yet until we go ahead and go back to the skill I already showed you, which was separate shell. So let's go ahead and separate shell. And what it'll do is now turn that hand into its own separate mesh. So now that I've got that, I don't need the rest of this body. I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of that. So in my objects browser, highlight the body, and then I can just use this little trash can icon, and now that is gone. Go ahead and highlight the fist, T function, and now I'm just going to spend a few minutes using these arrows, try to bring this into somewhat the area of play here that I want. Zoom in here so it's a little easier to see. Using these sliders, it's going to be kind of tricky to just get it exactly where I want, but after a few seconds here I should be able to get somewhat in the right space. And now just realizing I probably should have given myself a little more working room on that wrist so that I have less of that tape to deal with. But again, just trying to work these sliders so I get that in a pretty decent spot. And we'll find out for sure what will happen. I'll go ahead and accept that position for now. Because what I'll do now is I'll go ahead and cut this existing fist off as well right now. So I'll bounce over to the green mesh. Again, I'm going to use the select function just so I'm only working with this hand. Once it's highlighting, I'm going to go ahead and edit. I hit separate, so we don't want to do that. Control Z is our undo function. So again, edit, plain cut. And I'm just going to grab somewhat in this area here, this blue arrow to get the area of effect over to the other side. And probably bring this cut back. Yeah, I'm going to be left in a situation where I've got some wrist tape still on his wrist, but I think that'll be okay. We could either turn that into a wristband or Yeah, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll just turn that into a little bit of a wristband. Give it a little bit of detail on that hand. So I'll go ahead and accept that. Cut. So now the green hand is now gone. I've got the mirrored hand somewhat where I want it. So I'll go ahead and highlight that fist again. T to transform. And just work with that and just try to find a decent centering. Using the right mouse button to just kind of move the area of view around a little bit. What I'm trying to do is kind of center it within that wrist. And I think I've somewhat got it where I want it. Zoom back out and it looks like a pretty decent position. So maybe if anything, turn the fist up like that just a touch. Little minor repositioning there. And sadly, sometimes I get stuck where I can just do that all day until I get it perfect. But I think that's close enough. So we're going to go ahead and accept that positioning there. And if you remember from the previous video, we can go ahead and sculpt, grab a brush. My favorite is the Shrink Smooth. Sizing by default usually ends up a little bit too large, so I'm going to bring that down. Typically I grab size 25. Gives me a good working size with LJNs typically, and I'm just going to kind of smooth that little spot there. Zoom in onto the hand and just try to get rid of that little overage right there on the wrist. Little overages there. And now I can work on this hard edge here. So first thing I'll do is I'll switch back to the green mesh. Go to Sculpt, Brush, Smooth, Shrink Smooth I should say, and just touch that right there. And what that's doing is really kind of softening that hard edge and kind of turning that more into a rounded, softer, almost resembles a wristband, if you will. So that was kind of the idea. Not sure if Sin Cara is necessarily known for wearing or carrying a wristband, but for this exercise, we're going to go ahead and do that. If I wanted to come back and get rid of it, if I decide later on that I don't want it, I would just come back in with a Shrink Smooth brush and just file that away. Just smooth that right down until it's no longer visible. And then I would have, basically no wristband there. Zooming in, I just see, looks like the scan of the code, he picked up some of his decals. Yeah, that's all it is. Just a little bit of his decal coloring. So I'm just going to, while I see it, just kind of touch smooth those few bumps right there, if you saw that. That one right there on the front. Still keeping the detail creases in the pant legs. I do appreciate that. And then on this knee, you can see some leftover detail from where Cody had an image of, kind of a logo right there in his knee pad. So I'll kind of get rid of that. Zooming down here, I can see a little bit of noise from the scan. What I mean by noise is it's a little bit of a, deformation, if you will. Again, just using the Shrink Smooth brush, just kind of cutting that down a little bit. But I can work with this. It's not overly cut away, but what happened is essentially in scanning the figure, I can assume that during one scan, because what happens during the scan is that the camera, and I use an Einscan. It's a brand name Einscan. It's a desktop scanner with a pedestal. I'll try to get a picture of it, but if you just Google Einscan desktop scanner, 3D scanner, you'll see what I mean. What happens basically is as I'm scanning it, you have the figure in multiple positions, but what had happened between one scan or the other, because these figures are rubber, looks like one of these legs kind of got bent or is in a different positioning from one scan to the other, but not going to stress over that too much. In fact, when we go to finalize the figure, you can see a little bit of separation and noise on this side as well. Again, I could spend a long time kind of cleaning this up, but I've come to realize that once you actually print these, it's not as apparent as it seems here in the mesh or on the software. But also when I actually finalize the figure in the software, and I go ahead and make the figure solid, these minor cracks, crevices, imperfections, and blemishes do kind of settle themselves out. So don't overly stress those too much. There are there's a lot of simple cases where that noise does come into play. Anybody that's done any 3D scanning has probably dealt with that. You just want to kind of avoid muddying up the details too much. But when I go to make this solid, if I still have too many issues with it, there's a couple of tricks. I'll increase size on the background and shrink the foreground, and we'll get it detailed enough so that it'll be okay. It won't be perfect. It won't be, factory fresh like this Cody Rhodes figure is here, but it'll be pretty decent. And you can see the 3D scanner did an okay job grabbing, the boot detail. It's got, if you've ever held one of these or seen one of these figures, it's got laces kind of all the way down the front. And you can see the scanner kind of lost detail up in the toes, or I should say I've probably muddied those details up a little bit as I'm messing around with it. So the more I play with it, probably the less detailed that's going to be. So I'm not gonna stick with that all night. But I do want to come back to this hand. If you remember, we do have a separate mesh for the hand as well as the body. So I want to combine those. So just going to highlight both of those. And if you remember Boolean union, we'll go ahead and...
Here's what I found.
Sorry about that. We're going to go ahead and bring that back into one solid mesh. When it switches over to two separate colors, that lets you know that it's actually a success. If that would have highlighted all the way red, it would have come up with an error prompt as well, but letting you know that the combination of those two pieces didn't work. But I'm going to go ahead and hit accept on that. Let the system take a couple of seconds. Go ahead and join those together. Join and then refine. And oddly enough, it shows another green color. So I'm working with the Incredible Hulk here. Real quickly, while I've got my eye on it, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my sculpt and grab my smooth brush again, my shrink smooth, and just get rid of this line on his other wrist here. I was actually told that these Cody Rhodes figures are hollow, which is kind of funny, but there's also seams. So the hand, there's a seam up in that hand that I just smoothed out. But the head is also removable as well. You can see the seam on the figure as well if you look closely enough. So you can pop that head right off, and actually it's hollow underneath that. I think Swales was the one to show me that as well. So we're going to go back and do a head swap on this, and probably the first thing I'll do before I get rid of the Cody head is I'm going to import the head I want to use. So I'll go ahead and import. So import function up here. I don't know if you guys were able to see my window here, but I'm just grabbing just the head that we want to use. And that's going to generate real quick as a mesh. The meshes basically are kind of far away from each other in this plane, so just asking if Meshmixer wants us to correct that as best as it can. So we'll go ahead and move that, or select yes on that, and then we'll go ahead and start moving this mesh piece. So you can see the head actually way down there, and sometimes it's kind of a trick to find these. You just kind of have to move around to find the mesh as you add them. But T for transform again, blue arrow to bring it up, green arrow brings it forward, and just kind of play with these two arrows a couple of times just to kind of get it into a decent space. And you can see the scale is way off here. We're working with a an LJN size Cody Rhodes figure, or an almost LJN scale and a Mattel Sin Cara head. So the scaling is a little bit off. So using this white cube here, I'm going to left mouse click and drag upward, and that'll increase the size of the head that we're using here. So bring it up just enough size so I can work with it, and then again just kind of play with these arrows enough to get it into a space where we're somewhat comfortable with it, and then I can resize and reposition and all of that. So I feel like we're kind of getting there now. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect on first shot, because once we remove the Cody head, we'll be able to kind of play around with it. So we just want to get in a general spot here, or you know, a fair idea of where we want it. I think that'll probably be fine. The challenge we have here is that Cody Rhodes' mouth is open. Sin Cara's, you know, obviously wearing a mask with no mouth, so proportion and dimension here is thrown off a little bit, but we're kind of in a decent enough space here that I'm going to go ahead and accept that, just to kind of leave that in place. And now my next step is to go ahead and actually plain cut and remove Cody's head. So again, when I do that, the easiest thing or the best thing I'm going to do is isolate the area that I want to mess around with. And I should apologize because I forgot to grab the Cody mesh. So I'm going to go back, grab the Cody mesh, select, lasso the area again that I want to mess with. I like to turn it to the side because it kind of gives me an angle of where I want to plane cut. So basically I just want to kind of cut right down here, almost right in line with this line in the Mattel head. So I'll cut it just above that to give me some working space, leave me some of this neck and head area of Cody. But again, kind of line it up, come back over here to the edit up here function. Don't use this edit down here because it'll remove your selection. So use the edit button up here because this is part of the select option that we were messing with. So plain cut. The default is going to take it right down through the top of the head. I'm just going to go ahead and left mouse click and drag until I get the cut that I want. And again, the default grabbed the wrong side, so I'm going to click this blue area to reverse which side of the cut I want to be removed. And so that would be the top or the head portion of Cody. And right now what I'm just looking for is enough space between the cut and the Sin Cara head. So if there's not enough space, I'm just going to increase, or I should say kind of move that. So I just want to make sure I have enough room so that there's no gaps, no holes, nothing to have to correct or mess around with later. Any of this leftover chin stuff from Cody, we can easily take care of that. But that'll just give us a quick idea. So I'm going to go ahead and accept that cut and just get rid of that Cody head. And then we have Sin Cara's mask, or Sin Cara's head here to deal with. I'm going to kind of back up and just kind of play with the positioning a little bit, just to kind of see what I'm looking for here is just proportion, so size of that head. And I think size might be okay. I actually don't mind the angle on it so much, or I should say the look, kind of looking in one direction. I don't mind that either as much, but I do want to just kind of make sure that it's centered as much as possible and kind of really where I want it. So again, using your sliders and your arrows, you can reposition this anywhere you need to. I do think it's got to come this way. Yep. Just like that. And I'm feeling okay about that right there. I think that's in a pretty decent spot. I'll clean up some of this noise, or I should say this texturing almost, this bumping on Sin Cara's face. I could go back in and kind of detail that out a little bit more too. But for now, we'll go ahead and accept that positioning. And the first thing I want to kind of deal with and smooth out is the Cody. So I'm going to come down to the object browser and select Cody, or if you just select from mesh to mesh by left mouse clicking on the figures, you can switch between the two of them as well. Just give a little zoom in, but what I want to do here is go back to our sculpt, brush, shrink smooth, and just attack this extra Cody Rhodes chin here. Smooth that right out until it's no longer visible, and just kind of smoothing that neckline a little bit. I don't want to go too crazy in getting rid of his neck, because I do need some support for Sin Cara to have his head stand on. And kind of looking at the size of this, I could probably even come down a little bit on the head size. So let me go back to Sin Cara. Just shrinking that down just by left clicking that white cube and pulling it downward to shrink. If I were to drag that upwards, it would increase the size of that Sin Cara head. But feeling that that's a little bit better. And again, you can kind of mess with that, mess with the sizing to your liking. I know some customizers tend to over-exaggerate the heads a little bit. I don't know if that's necessarily by choice or just by the heads that they purchased, but some look a little bit bigger, some look a little bit smaller. I do my best to try to stay consistent with sizing and see what happens. But again, go ahead and sculpt, shrink smooth. This time I'm actually smoothing out the Sin Cara mask a little bit, just to kind of cut down the size along the mask to the neck area. And while I've got the shrink smooth here, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of smooth out some of this texturing on his face as well. Just so it doesn't look so material-like, if you will, or textured. Sometimes I like to leave that definition in there. Sometimes I like to really grind it out, depending on who the figure is and kind of what the detail level I'm looking for. Sometimes I use it to kind of leave a stubble or a partial beard, if you will. And sometimes I we'll leave the texture just to kind of show differences between one item and the other. Like I'll probably leave the texture on these side pieces of Sin Cara's mask and just kind of smooth out the rest of it, just to kind of show a difference between the two. But I won't spend all day on this. You guys could watch me smooth this for the next few hours, but I really want to focus on kind of the exercise and the training here, as opposed to the finished product. I can come back in later and retouch those up. So I kind of smooth that out. Now I'll go back to the Cody figure, and I do want to, again, sculpt, brush, shrink smooth, tackle this neck and chin piece a little bit more. And I'm just kind of shrinking that away. Get it down just enough so that when I add the two together, it doesn't look like one consistent piece. It's kind of, you want it to still look like a mask, if you will. But so there's that. I feel like that's actually really quite decent. I'm gonna scan on the inside of the model real quick. If you guys remember seeing me do this earlier, just looking for just real crazy oddities. Because when I combine these two, if there's like floating pieces, that can really impact the workload on the next step, but also like the integrity. Again, we want to avoid anything hollow. Click back over to the Sin Cara mesh, sculpt and smooth again. Just kind of cut this down just enough. There we go. And I'm feeling like that's pretty good. And I think in the next step too, we'll be able to really make that look like a mask as well once we kind of combine these. So again, to combine, we're going to go ahead and highlight both items just by selecting or hotkeying the control button and clicking on both. That's kind of an easy way to multi-select multiple items within the viewable field. But I'm going to grab both of those, and again, under the edit function here gives us the Boolean union option. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. Again, the system's going to run through its It's quick setting, it's refining, it's annihilating, and then it'll remesh. And hopefully we get a successful union of the two pieces. And we did. So actually it's looking pretty badass. It's looking really cool. The next thing I want to do is go ahead and just accept that union of those two parts, so the computer can go ahead and finish those up. Again, if I had an error in that whole screen would blow up red, and you'd see some pretty crazy pop-ups on the screen that you know that it wasn't exactly working out. But now the system's going to go ahead and reduce those meshes again and make one solid piece, and brought us back to green again. I don't mind working in different colors. If you do have an issue with colors, you can always edit these. And looking at it, I can see what appears to be maybe an issue right there. That little blue line might be just a separation between the two meshes. What I like to do after a union like this is, or once I see something like that, one thing I like to do real quickly and easily is click on the Analysis tab and go to the Inspector tool. This is a pretty handy tool that'll find any issues within the two meshes. And actually 3 meshes, because I didn't even run the inspector after I did the hand mesh, so, or the hand union I should say. So found me a couple of errors, which is pretty awesome, pretty handy. So I'll go ahead and auto repair both of those. Sometimes the system isn't able to repair them, and you kind of sometimes have to go in. I've even had to remove or cut away certain aspects of the piece and refill or remesh some areas to make it work. But these 2 or these 3 errors I had were successfully fixed by the software. You can kind of see right here, there's no longer that blue line, and basically all it was just a separation between the two meshes that showed that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit done here, finalizing the inspector. Again, go back to sculpt, zoom out a little bit, my handy shrink smooth tool, reposition it so I can work on the head and neck area. And now that these two meshes are one solid piece, I can kind of work on the neck, or this mask a little bit more, and try to make that look more one piece. For this particular demonstration, I'm not going to spend too much time beating this up, smoothing this out, just enough to give you guys the idea of what I'm working on here. Hopefully you guys are trying this out, working with it. Message me on Facebook, email me, message me on YouTube. Any way you can. If you have any questions, any issues with any of the tools I'm giving you here, let me know. I'm pretty responsive, or as responsive as I can be. Working from home and having a couple of kids and a dog and everything else, but I'll try to be as responsive as I possibly can. Not super comfortable with the way that these are kind of coming together, so I'm going to switch brushes and go to the bubble smooth. And what this does is kind of increase size between 2 seams. I'm going to try to bring that valley out a little bit on that, just to mess with it just a little bit. Kind of bringing that. Probably takes a while, or you're probably not seeing all the details that I'm trying to bring out. You can kind of see a little bit of increase there as I was holding on to that. As you're messing with it at home on your guys' computers, hopefully you're able to really see and kind of pick up on these skills as I've kind of showed you. But again, message me if you forget. Go back and review the videos. If you have trouble with certain meshes or certain things and you want me to kind of help you out, let me know. I'll work with you. We'll figure out ways to to get everybody up to, you know, comfort level with the stuff. And a stronger custom community is good for everybody, I think. It's going to increase some competition, and everybody kind of wants to show off some awesome work. Not necessarily be the best. There's clearly some amazing customizers in a lot of these groups on Facebook that I'm in, as well as some of the friends that I've met through eBay, through Facebook, certainly, through a lot of other ways. I just kind of met up with some people, and common ground have been able to work through this. One thing I'm thinking about is smoothing out this belt. I don't think necessarily Sin Cara rocked a belt so much. I think I could quickly smooth this out with enough, give you guys enough idea to just kind of know what I was up to. Doesn't have to be perfect here on this first go around, but I'll go ahead and just continually use the shrink smooth, and just kind of eventually get rid of this entire belt so it's not even there. Sometimes I flip-flop between shrink smooth and bubble smooth. So bubble, you can kind of see the increases as it's coming out. So in the valleys, I'll do bubble, and then I'll come back and either use shrink smooth again, or sometimes robust smooth. Robust smooth seems to be a real nice in between, nice effective smoothing tool as well. Don't forget to change your viewing angles. Sometimes it's details that you don't necessarily see until you completely turn it around and mess with it and see different things. But you can kind of see, again, some kind of valleys in here, some bigger spots, some higher spots. Just kind of adding material, and then come back to shrink smooth, and you just kind of take some material away as well. I say material like it's a piece of clay, and that's how I look at this. It's just kind of a piece of molded clay that I'm just kind of moving around and working with here. There's a couple of tricks I got to kind of even this line out as well. Hopefully I can get it on the first go around. It's kind of a unique, difficult skill. Sometimes it takes me a while to really mess with it and get it to a point where I want. Sometimes I get lucky and I'm able to kind of nail the desired effect right off. But I'll test it out and show you guys real quick. But I'm going to, again, kind of continue to smooth out all this detail. Sin Cara wasn't necessarily known for wearing a big old weight belt, and I try to stay pretty close to true to form, if you will, or true to detail. The more accurate I can be resembling the figure, I think the better it comes out. So having a weight belt on Sin Cara just kind of loses a little bit, I think. So don't want to spend all night doing this for you guys. I can always come back in and handle this, but just to get a somewhat desired effect here. Again, I can kind of smooth it out, but there's going to be a tool I'm going to introduce to you guys called I call it the pinch tool, but I think that might work pretty well here in getting these details, or at least this waistband, kind of lined up, because that's, I think, really the only thing that's causing this to look kind of messed up right now. Using the bubble smooth to add material. So kind of putting it underneath the belt, and then coming back and shrink smooth over the top where the buckle and everything else kind of was. It's going to take some more grinding here to kind of get rid of that belt buckle altogether. Change your views often so that you can get better looks, better feels of where everything is. And I think this is actually a good opportunity to bring in another brush. I like to use the flatten brush. And that just kind of will flatten that space right out real good. So get rid of those buckles. That's nice. And actually the flatten brush is giving me the ability to tighten up that waistband a little bit as well. So kind of ironing over this a few times. Using this flat brush to kind of push that material up as I'm going across. If my mouse doesn't get stuck and create a big circle bubble there, I'll be all right. So kind of flatten that out a little bit, and then I can come back to my shrink smooth. Shrink smooth does a great job of kind of washing away and kind of eliminating those lines that I just added in with the flatten brush. So coming across it pretty quickly, cleaning that up. Doing a little bit on the back area. And from a distance, not looking too bad. Zooming in, again, could use quite a bit more touch up. You can flip-flop between the flatten brush and the shrink smooth, and just kind of get these details or non-existence of details where you want them. But I had mentioned a brush that I like before that I really like is the pinch. And pinch is kind of sometimes difficult to get used to. Sometimes dealing with the size and the strength of the pinch is hard to get the exact desired effect. So I tend to Control Z a lot when I'm messing with the pinch. But basically what I want to do is just kind of pinch and tighten up this line a little bit. So just like that, I'm just going to grab, pull it right across, and what it does, it kind of adds or pinches that line together. It's not a perfect tool, but does a fairly decent job of bringing that edge line together, I think. Depending on your the shakiness of your hands, you may be able to get a better line in there than me. Sometimes the shake works in favor with me, sometimes it plays against me. But anyways, long story short, I got a pretty decent line there. Come back and shrink smooth. Got a little bit of a bubble in there. Not quite loving that, but a couple more things I could try to kind of get rid of that little punch he's got going on there. I could do a cool trick here. So you see this little bulge right there. I'm not really digging that. I could come back and grab a move tool or move brush. Bring up a little bit more size. I think 25 might be too small for what I'm trying to do here. But I'm going to go ahead and grab 33. Just kind of move that up a little bit. Don't forget to change your view. Just kind of moving all of that mesh inward. We can come back through and detail that out a little bit. But just kind of bringing in that paunch, if you will, or that little increased size. So that move really kind of digs into that area there. It's one way to do it. And then I'll come back, shrink smooth. I'll come down size on the shrink smooth a little bit so it's not so aggressive, so large. Really what I'm looking for is just, lack of detail in this area. I don't really need to detail that out or anything like that. Just kind of want it gone and kind of flat. And you can see that kind of bulge is, for the most part, gone now. Just kind of moving that material back into the body and then coming back and re-smoothing, it's really kind of helped us out and flushing that out real good. So same thing could go on the back side of the belt. Just bringing in the pinch and just adjusting size. This one may be a little tricky just due to the angle here, but I'm just going to start my pinch on this side and just see what I can do to kind of lower that line. You can kind of see first pass it. I kind of brought it down quite a bit, almost to the desired effect, but let me come back and do it one more time. Just pinching, holding the left mouse button and just dragging across. Still holding that mouse button, still holding, and as I drag that. That's another way to kind of lower that waistband. And now I can come back in and do the same thing again with the shrink smooth. Kind of take off that side bubble as well. Shrink smooth is an awesome, awesome tool. And if you go too far, do too much of it, Control Z can bring you right back and undo anything if you've accidentally, or sometimes, you know, sometimes you kind of second guess what you've done. So Control Z, really, really helpful. So cutting into this material, smoothing this out, getting a fairly decent finish right here on this waist. So in short order, we were able to mirror this figure, do a quick hand swap, did a head swap, and removed some details here. So overall, a fairly decent action on this figure. And I'm really digging the overall feel of this figure too. I think this is going to be a pretty solid figure when you look at it. So a couple more steps and then we'll have this finished up. The one thing I want to do real quickly is make solid. So it is still one mesh, but I'm going to go ahead and go to the make solid button under the edit field. This will take a couple of minutes. Again, it does a quick making solid. So what this will do is essentially make everything one whole piece. So inside it's completely hollow all the way through, all the way to the ends. But anyways, the solid default is fast. We want to switch this over to accurate and increase detail. The default is 128. I increase it to 1028 and then hit update. And this should bring back all of our details. Overall, the program's pretty fast and easy to use. I say easy, relative. As far as messing with Blender or ZBrush, it's very limited capabilities, very limited brushes, if you will, in comparison to some of those other programs. The barrier to learn it was pretty easy, and I just kind of stuck with it. I've bounced over to, like I said, I bounced over to ZBrush, and just didn't quite like it. I actually bought a big drawing tablet with a pressure sensitive pen and all that, which was pretty awesome. A lot of fun to use. Just got to a point where I could do the same thing in Meshmixer for a fraction of the time. So, you know, I've continued to make all my customs right here on Meshmixer, and it's a free software, so it's kind of one I wanted to highlight for you all as you know, something that you guys can all jump in and not really have any reasons not to. As far as a subscription to ZBrush goes, you're talking quite a few $100s annually, or something along those lines. So anyways, after making it solid, looking pretty good. I don't see really any errors in this. It's all one color, back to the flat gray again. I'm going to go ahead and hit accept. And as that goes ahead and accepts this, I'll reposition it. Go back to the feet. I showed you before we had some issues with the feet, so a couple of things we can do real quick is going back to our brushes. Shrink smooth. We can kind of cut into that line a little bit. Bubble smooth can kind of increase that underneath area. And again, once you go to print this on a 3D printer, a lot of this won't really be an issue either. It won't be as visible as it is here on this figure. If you don't adjust it enough, though, you can have fractures in your print. You know, in some cases, almost to the point where you got to come back and add in some epoxy or milliput. But just changing angle, adding a material can kind of eliminate some of these creases. Eliminate some of those imperfections in the mesh. You can see, you know, a few issues in here. I can come back in with the pinch tool. Drop size down probably. And I can kind of redraw in some of these details if I want. That one's going to turn into a complete nightmare, isn't it? Well, one thing I can always do is do a mirrored shift and move that boot right over. That's actually not a bad idea. I'm going to just backwards Control Z out, undo some of these. Almost to the point where I'm going to take another effort at smoothing that out and kind of editing those. But chances are you can see that, you know, some of these are kind of drastic. So probably what I'll do in this case is I might just cut this boot off, mirror it, cut the boot off like we did the hand swap, bring this boot over so I have two fairly decent looking boots, or two good enough looking boots. I know it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but better than what we're dealing with right there. So yeah, I'll just cut that, move it over, reattach it. But for now, I think we've done quite a bit on this model here, so I'll go ahead and finish this up on my side. Don't forget to export and save these out so you don't lose your files. And next time we'll grab a new figure, see what we can do to add to the LJN collection for everybody. Thanks again for checking it out, and we'll see you on the next one.